This story comes out of India. A guy was interviewing to get into an engineering institution. And as he was being interviewed, the interviewer looked at him and asked him this question. If you are sitting in a train compartment that is speeding along and it is extremely hot in there, what would you do? The guy said, I'd open the window. So the interviewer said, good answer. Second question, if the window was 1.5 meters in dimension, 1 square meters, and the compartment is 12 cubic meters in dimension, and the train is moving at 80 kilometers an hour, and the wind is blowing at a certain speed in this direction, how long would it take for you to be comfortable in your compartment? The guy says, I don't know the answer to that. He said, then you don't qualify. Out. Guy left, and as he was walking out, the other students waiting said, what was the question? And he told them the question. So the next guy comes in, and the interviewer says to him, if you are in a train compartment and it's speeding along and it's very hot, what would you do? He said, I'd take my jacket off. Interviewer said, but after you take your jacket off, if it is still hot, what are you going to do? He said, I'll take my shirt off. He said, but it's burning hot. He said, I'll take my trousers off. So the interviewer says to him, what if you're dying? He said, even if I'm dying, I'm not going to open that window. You see, when you know what the questions are, and he knew what was coming next, the dimension of the window, the dimensions of the compartment, the speed of the wind, the velocity of the train, he didn't want to deal with that. And let me tell you something. The naturalistic framework in our time, and what do I mean by that? The philosophy of naturalism, which takes time plus matter plus chance, has brought you and me into being. There is no transcendent perspective. There are no absolutes as points of reference by which and for which we must live. They will give you all of this philosophy. They are unable to answer one of the most fundamental questions that emerges from that philosophy. And to you and me, actually, there are two basic questions that have to be answered if we are going to make coherent sense out of our lives, out of your living and mine. The first question is this: who is God? And of course, subsumed in that question is the assumption that God actually exists. So that's fine. You've got both of those wrapped up in there. But there is a second question that the naturalist has to answer. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human? We talk of humanism. We talk of humanistic philosophies as if it's a monolithic sense in which you can answer that. Humanism itself comes from about 7 different philosophical perspectives, but we use the word human being, not human doing. So we have to answer, what does it mean to be human? You can't go the existential route and only define yourself by what you do. You have to go the essential route by defining who you are. Who you are ought to be the basis on which you behave the way you do. What you do results from your very being. David, over 3,000 years ago, writing as a poet, a psalmist, and a shepherd boy and a king, raised both of these two questions. One he implicitly answers, the second he explicitly questions. And I'm going to read for you from Psalm chapter 8. This is what he says in that psalm. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. You have set your glory above the heavens. From the lips of children and infants, you have ordained praise because of your enemies to silence the foe and the avenger. When I consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have set in place, what is man that you're mindful of him? The Son of Man that you care for him. You made him a little lower than the heavenly beings and crowned him with glory and honor. You made him rule over the works of your hands. You put everything under his feet, all flocks and herds and the beasts of the field and the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, all that swim the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. It is amazing how David begins and how he ends and what he puts into these handful of verses, from the glory of the heavens and the planets to the tiny little splendor of a babe in arms, all the way to the question, what is there in man? Why do you really take even note of him?